All right. Welcome in, Irish fans. This is another episode of Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm your host for today's show, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Sorry for a little bit of technical difficulties here, but you're watching Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I am Ben Belden. I'm the host of today's show. If you're new here to the channel, you may know me from doing some of the post-game things for Notre Dame football during the season. That's something, obviously, that we're going to continue to do. But this is kind of my first episode since really last football season ended after taking a nice long off-season vacation, if you will. So I'm excited to get back to talking about Notre Dame football here with you all. So if you are watching, I know we've got a couple listeners watching already, and may have a few more as we go along here. But if you're watching and you have something to say, something to add to our conversation this evening, please feel free to drop a comment. If you're watching on the Notre Dame YouTube channel, again, this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And like I say, we're about, I didn't look today. I think we're about 54 days away from Notre Dame kicking off in Columbus against the Ohio State Buckeyes, a game that, as an Ohioan myself, I'm interested in. Been licking my chops for that particular game, here for quite a long time. So since basically, it got announced that it was scheduled, however many years ago that was. But we're not going to talk Notre Dame and Ohio State today. We're going to keep it short today. Like I say, it's been a while since I've been here, been on this channel. We're going to keep it short and sweet, talk about some of the very most latest things that have gone on with Notre Dame. And like I say, if, maybe we go a little bit longer if we get a couple comments and things. So, if you've been living under a rock, Notre Dame's had quite the off season. Obviously just dating way back to January to, the hiring of Marcus Freeman, to hitting the ground running with recruiting, some turnover in the, in the coaching staff in terms of, who the assistant coaches were. And obviously the big thing that is, like I say, if you've been living under a rock, Notre Dame recruiting has, really not missed a beat. In fact, I wouldn't say it hasn't missed a beat. I would say it really started running a lot faster when Marcus Freeman took over. To me, one thing that I want to real quickly, since it's been a long time since I've gotten behind the microphone, it seems like it's, I think often about the difference between Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly and their recruiting styles, and the way that, Notre Dame recruits and has been recruiting since Marcus Freeman became the head guy. And we're going to talk about a particular recruit or two today. And it really comes down to this for me, in terms of the difference between, what Notre Dame has been doing over the course of the last 12 years or so versus what they've been able to do, this recruiting period. To me, the biggest difference, Brian Kelly as the recruiter that, he put a lot of emphasis on his assistant coaches. He got his assistant coaches to go out there and recruit and do those things. And he kind of managed things as a CEO, pretty much decided, we're not even going to waste our time doing, recruiting certain guys because they don't necessarily fit the Notre Dame mold, or, they're not going to choose us because they're going to end up choosing Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia or an SEC type of a team. Marcus Freeman doesn't seem to have those preconceived notions that Brian Kelly does. And not only that, does Marcus Freeman, he leaves no stone unturned when it comes to Notre Dame football recruiting. And I think that's that idea that we're going to go after everybody. We're going to, I want all the dudes. There was a question at some point during this particular offseason when CJ Carr committed to Notre Dame, whether Notre Dame was going to continue to go after Dante Moore. And this is going to be something that I'm going to talk about here in a hot second. But, in terms of answering that particular question, yes, Notre Dame was going to continue to go after Dante Moore. Obviously, like I'm going to talk about here in a few seconds, That didn't work out particularly well. Dante Moore obviously ended up going elsewhere. However, my point is that, Brian Kelly was the type of guy that, he was selecting, he had the idea that we are only shopping in certain aisles at the grocery store. To now it seems like the whole grocery store is, verging on the clearance rack for Marcus Freeman. He's going through every aisle. He's leaving no stone unturned. He's going after guys that I don't even think Brian Kelly would bother going after. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at the end of the day, you've seen the fruits of that labor with Marcus Freeman and his recruiting style. These are just a few things that I've been talking about lately that, on my Twitter, as I've kind of conversed with Notre Dame football fans. So, like I say, the recruiting style is different from Marcus Freeman, and obviously Notre Dame is seeing the benefits of that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about just real quickly something, the most recent news with Notre Dame football, and that's the recent recruitment and the miss of quarterback Dante Moore. So, if you are new here or new to this channel or new to following Notre Dame football, obviously Notre Dame's top target in the 2023 class undoubtedly was five-star quarterback Dante Moore out of Detroit, Michigan. Again, if you've missed it, Notre Dame seemed to be the leader in the clubhouse for Dante Moore. Seemed like he was a solid, pretty confident commit at some point. Still balls were going in for Dante Moore to commit to Notre Dame. Everything seemed to be trending to Dante Moore being Notre Dame's elite recruit in the class of 2023. Obviously, as we saw this past Friday, that didn't happen. Dante Moore ended up committing to the University of Oregon, and people wonder where things went wrong. And, let me make this very clear that, I don't have sources, close to these recruits. I don't have, inside knowledge. I do a good bit of reading from different people who talk about these things, who are experts in these areas, who have obviously a little bit more inside knowledge than I do. And I kind of try to read the tea leaves, I guess you could kind of say, about what happens. And people, of course, come up with some theories about what happened with Dante Moore. And where Notre Dame went wrong. Did Notre Dame just give up? Did Notre Dame just punt on the recruitment of Dante Moore? What happened? How did he end up at Oregon? Here's really my theory. And like I say, this comes from, reading some insider things, from, social media, from just following the recruiting trail as more of a fan. If you listen to anybody, or read anybody, or listen to the Notre Dame podcasts from the insiders, it sounds pretty clear that Dante Moore was at some point, at the very least, a silent commit to Notre Dame at some point. Now, where did things get wrong? Well, if you ask the Notre Dame fans, if you ask people on Twitter, well, when Notre Dame started recruiting C.J. Carr, five-star quarterback out of the state of Michigan, Michigan legacy quarterback in the class of 2024, Dante Moore was, just decided, well, I'm not going to go where another five-star quarterback is going to go. And therefore Notre Dame is no longer interested in me. I'm not interested in Notre Dame. And Notre Dame said the same thing. We got CJ Carr. We're going to stop recruiting Dante Moore. This could not be, in my opinion, couldn't be further from the truth. I don't really think those types of things are what happened with Dante Moore's recruitment. First off, any five-star quarterback that thinks they're worth their salt does not care that another quarterback in a different class than them is going to commit to a school. Okay. We've seen it. I always use the example. Ohio State had JT Barrett and Cardale Jones and whoever the heck else they had. They have CJ Stroud. They had Quinn Ewers at one point. They brought in five-star commits, high quality commits and I'm just talking about the quarterback position, but you can really go on down the line. The best teams bring in the best players at every position every single year. There are multiple 5-star commits at quarterback, at running back, at wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, all the defensive positions. So I really don't think that Dante Moore sat and looked at Notre Dame recruiting another quarterback in a different class and said, I'm not interested in Notre Dame anymore. I really just have a tough time believing that that's what a kid who was as competitive as Dante Moore is, and we know he is from reading the things that the experts. I don't think a little bit of a quarterback competition scared Dante Moore away from Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame also said, oh, hey, we're satisfied with CJ Carr in the class of 2024, and then went ahead and said, we're not so worried. We don't even want Dante Moore on our roster. I don't think that's the way that Marcus Freeman operates in recruiting, and it would be stupid to operate in such a way, in my opinion. What I actually think happens is that, Dante Moore, and you can make all these NIL conspiracies and arguments all you want. What I think happened is that Dante Moore decided that he was going to, he was a soft commit to Notre Dame. And at some point when he became a soft commit to Notre Dame said, hey, listen, we want you to, go public with this so that you can, be our leader in that 2023 class and start recruiting the other positions. And Dante Moore just wasn't ready to do that yet. He continued to take those official visits. Whether or not you think Notre Dame put a little bit more pressure, like, hey, come on now. Like, we know you want to be here. We know you want to be there. Let's go ahead and get this done so that we can continue to put that class together. Those conversations were probably had. Whether or not, Dante was a little bit turned off by Notre Dame being pushed. I don't know. Like I say, I'm speculating completely here. At some point along the line, Dante Moore decided, well, I don't want to be the leader of Notre Dame's class of 2023. I want to play out this recruitment. I want to be courted by these teams, the Texas A&Ms, the LSUs, the Michigans of the world, and obviously Oregon, where he ended up committing. And this isn't going to work out. And at some point, Notre Dame and Dante Moore just were no longer seeing eye to eye. And the commitment cooled. And I really think the CJ Carr commitment was icing on the cake. When CJ Carr committed, it was kind of the relationship between Notre Dame and Dante Moore was already probably a little bit fractured at that point. And, as someone is saying in the comments, Notre Dame 2164, he says, I don't think Dante Moore committed to Oregon. I think his dad committed to Nike. Well, I mean, again, like I say, NIL theories, I'll hear them. That's probably not a bad assumption to make that NIL had something to do with it. But again, the bottom line and the point that I'm getting to in a roundabout way here is that if Dante Moore didn't want to commit to Notre Dame publicly, didn't want to be the guy to lead that 2023 class, to start, to get on some other guys, some receivers, to commit also to Notre Dame, then do you want Dante Moore to be your quarterback of the future? I mean, I think that's a legitimate question. If he's that competitive and he's that much of a leader and he's that much of a good guy and he's, this game-changing type of a guy, but he won't go public with his commitment. He doesn't want to recruit to the class of 2023 at Notre Dame. I just don't know that he's the quarterback that you necessarily want. Do I love Dante Moore as a football player? Yes. I had a great time, watching some of his film. And when I say film, mostly highlights, I guess you could say. It would have been a lot of fun to watch Dante Moore in South Bend on Saturdays. It just didn't work out. And, maybe it was for the better, because if he didn't want to do those things while he was being recruited, he maybe didn't want to do those things as the leader of a football team, as a guy that, other guys were going to look to. And maybe it was just better that it didn't work out. Chris Unherded, thanks for your comment. Chris says perhaps he'll do poorly, or Oregon will do poorly this season. He'll come back to Notre Dame. There's something to be said for that. I think that that is something that happens from time to time in college football. A guy goes to a place for a couple of years, it doesn't work out. Unforeseen things happen in the Notre Dame football quarterback room. And all of a sudden, since there was a relationship there, it becomes easier for a guy like Dante Moore to come back to Notre Dame. I mean, I'm not saying that's not out of the question. I wouldn't put money on it, but I think that's something, that could happen. I mean, I wouldn't say it's likely. I think, like I say, probably as others have alluded to, there was some NIL money there that's going to keep him at Oregon. Oregon's going to roll out the red carpet. And if I have any hunch about how Dante Moore is going to do as a football player, it's going to be pretty well. So anyway, that brings me kind of then to my next point. In terms of moving on from Dante Moore, as some of our listeners want us to do. Yes, I do actually want to move on from talking about Dante Moore. In fact, that's kind of why I started with this topic, because now that leads into the next phase. And we're going to talk about a couple of these recruits that Notre Dame has landed, but really who I want to talk about is a guy, Austin Novosad, who just got an offer from Notre Dame today. He's a commit to Baylor out of the state of Texas, a guy that's really been kind of shooting up the boards in terms of his popularity as a quarterback. Obviously after missing out on Dante Moore, Notre Dame, I have to stress this, and I have to stress this a lot of times. Notre Dame is going to, regardless of the fact that, Buckner is going to be there for a couple of years, and then CJ Carr at some point is going to come in. Maybe even CJ Carr becomes that quarterback in the 2023 class if he reclassifies, although there's not really a ton of credible information that says he's going to do that, at least not yet. Notre Dame's going to continue to recruit that position in this class of 2023. And, just today, Marcus Freeman was allegedly on the phone with Austin Novosad, this quarterback out of Texas, and extended an offer to be the quarterback at Notre Dame. Novosad is not a guy that, prior to about 20 minutes before I got behind this microphone and behind the camera here, was a guy that I knew a whole ton about. I was kind of doing my Austin Novosad crash course here prior to this show. But again, that's a guy to keep an eye on. He's a guy that, like I say, one of his first big offers was Baylor. It seems like he committed to Baylor pretty early. He's really, even though he's been a verbal commit to Notre Dame, seems to be a guy that he's a verbal commit to Baylor, seems to be a guy that has kind of kept his recruitment early and open from his early commitment. Sorry, stumbling over my words there. I'm also trying to read your comments at the same time, which always gets me going. But, and is a guy that has picked up offers from, the Texas A&Ms of the world and, some other schools like Ohio State. A guy that is a pretty typical pocket passer, a guy with a big arm, a guy that has thrown for a lot of yards playing in Texas as a high schooler, and a guy that I think would be a great get for Notre Dame to get into that quarterback room. Again, like I say, he's just, when you watch him, he may not have the elite pedigree of an Archie Manning. He may not have, the notoriety of even a CJ Carr in Notre Dame's 2024 class. He might not be, up there yet, but he's a guy that has been shooting up the boards of the experts, a guy that has been gaining a lot of notoriety as of late, as the Elite 11 and things carries on this summer. And a guy that, again, I'm not an expert in quarterback recruiting, especially, a guy that just got an offer today, a few hours before I got on this podcast, but a guy that you can keep an eye on in terms of Notre Dame and what they're going to do with that 2023 class. As Chris Unheard It Again says, I think Angeli may surprise. Absolutely. I actually am I'm actually a big Steve Angeli fan, a guy that I think that will be better than advertised. Let's put it that way. I think, even just seeing a little bit of a glimpse of the spring game shows you what Steve Angeli can do. Notre Dame is just fine in the quarterback room. Obviously right now they've got Buckner, who I think is the leader in the clubhouse in terms of, who's going to start this season. Drew Pine obviously has probably a little bit of something to say about that as well. We'll kind of see. The only thing we as fans really saw from Drew Pine was a spring game that really wasn't that great, to be honest with you. Angeli, I think, is going to be really good. Obviously you throw CJ, that going to get somebody in the class of 2023, whether it's Carr reclassifying or whether they go outside and find somebody else and then go into 2024 and find another quarterback. But Notre Dame's going to do their due diligence here. They're going to bring in another arm. They're going to continue to recruit at a high level. As many have said repeatedly this offseason, the arrow for Notre Dame is still pointing up. And to be honest, I got to be, this may be kind of a little bit of a hot take to put it this way, but I think the way Notre Dame is recruited in 2023, without, Marcus Freeman really having, a jump start, especially these offensive guys. Some of these 2023 recruits have been recruited for 2 or 3 years. Marcus Freeman hasn't recruited a lot of these guys that he has been, recruiting to Notre Dame over the course of 2 or 3 years. So, I think that it's very easy to get wrapped up in how good Notre Dame is doing right now and not realize that maybe even the best recruiting for Notre Dame is going to come, once Marcus Freeman has had in 2024, 2025, when he's had a chance to, get to know some of these kids and recruit these kids over 2 and 3 years throughout their high school career. I think that's evidenced by, Marcus Freeman has offered at this point a couple of, I believe, 8th graders, kids that haven't even played high school football yet. That type of stuff wasn't happening under Brian Kelly. That type of stuff, is stuff that you hear some of these other programs doing. Marcus Freeman, like I say, is continuing to elevate Notre Dame recruiting, is continuing to really hustle on the recruiting trail, and is really, again, the arrow is pointed up. The progress has already been unheard of, better than what you would probably expect from Notre Dame in recruiting recently. And again, like I say, I think this is something that, you're going to see the fruits of Marcus Freeman's labors even more so in these future classes. Looking at some of the comments here. I like this comment. If something happens to Tyler Buckner, it's probably Pine time before Angeli. I agree with that as well. Perhaps the offering of Novosad lets you know about CJ Carr reclassifying. If Notre Dame, that's true. If Notre Dame really thought that CJ Carr was going to reclassify to 2023, do they offer a quarterback today? I guess probably not. Then again, maybe they don't know at all. Maybe they're 50-50 and they're just saying, hey, until we know otherwise, he's a 2024 recruit, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to offer guys to fill that. Here's a question here. Notre Dame has the number 1 recruiting class. Technically, they've, with the recruitment and the commitment of Jason Moore to Ohio State, they technically have fallen to number 2, although the point still holds. Are they doing the old A&M Miami routine for these recruits? No, no, they're not. I think that Notre Dame has a very reasoned approach to NIL. It's really hard to tell, what exactly is going on with these NIL stories that you hear. Nobody really knows. But I think when Notre Dame, there still is some truth that Notre Dame is going to recruit certain guys and not certain, and they're going to miss on certain guys. Dante Moore is an example of that. If Nike said, hey, we're going to offer you this amount of money if you come here and you play for Oregon to Dante Moore, then there's nothing Notre Dame can do about that. But Notre Dame is going to have a very reasoned approach to NIL. They just announced, their NIL movements that, Brady Quinn is kind of heading up a little bit. And I think that, when you sit down with a player and their family and say, here's our plan, we're not going to offer you $5 million and, a Lamborghini, but we're going to make it so that you can get good exposure. We're going to get you some regional businesses and, you're going to learn how to, do this before you become an NFL player, make a little bit of money, play in a place where you get a ton of notoriety and a lot of eyes on you. I think that's appealing to a lot of teams, a lot of players. Even though some teams are, kind of operating outside those parameters just a little bit and probably pushing that NIL a little bit differently than what Notre Dame can do. All right. We're going to switch gears here just a little bit. We've been on for about 26 minutes. Again, thank you to those of you who have tuned in to watch this. Again, this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I am Ben Belden. Again, if you are a veteran to this channel, I do Notre Dame post game pretty often. And I've had, I've been with Nathan Erbach. I've been with, a couple of other guys on this channel. I've at times talked with Mark on this channel. From time to time, we also talk on the Mark Rogers, the whole Mark Rogers TV, the big channel. This is kind of the Notre Dame regional channel that we're live on right now. So if you're new here, make sure that even if you're not a Notre Dame fan, and I know we've got a couple of those in the comments, even if you're not a Notre Dame fan, if you find Notre Dame football at all interesting, make sure you subscribe. In the description below this video, there is a place where if you enjoy the content, not only on this channel, but on Mark Rogers' channel altogether, that you can contribute to that and help him continue to have good guys on. It's the ESPN of YouTube, to be honest with you. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it's a great place for your college football knowledge. Whether you are a Notre Dame fan or whatever team you're a fan of, Mark Rogers TV has them covered. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for participating here today. Again, I'm Ben Belden. Make sure that you tune in. You can follow me on Twitter at RealBBelden. I tweet about some of these things on a daily basis. I don't get behind the camera all that often, although that will continue to ramp up here in the coming weeks as we get ready for football season. And, so if you want to continue this conversation over on Twitter, make sure you follow me over there. We can have this conversation on a more regular basis. I'd be happy to follow you back and continue this conversation in that way as well. All right. So, I don't know that I wanted to do this on this particular show. But I think that, there's been a little bit of a conversation going on in the comments about conference realignment, about those types of things. And I think it would be remiss to at least not spend a minute or two here as I get closer to wrapping up our time here this evening talking about conference realignment. So first of all, before I go into that, we've got, about 20 people. We've been anywhere from, up to 27, 28 people at different times watching this. If you want to talk about conference realignment, if you have an opinion about conference realignment, go ahead, even before I start saying anything right now, go ahead and drop your opinion in the comments. I'd be interested in hearing what you guys think about Notre Dame and how they fit into the conferences, and if these conferences are good for college football. Like I say, I've already talked for upwards of getting close to 30 minutes now. I don't really intend to. This could be a whole conversation where I could talk for a whole hour about Notre Dame joining the Big Ten or the SEC or whatever conference. And I don't really intend to do that at this particular time. However, here's what I'll say about conference realignment in general, and then eventually about Notre Dame and, should they join a conference? Should they remain independent? What very little things I've heard about Notre Dame joining a conference and everything in between. First of all, conference realignment are bad for college football. I don't know. I think that there are a million takes on this right now. I think without really knowing the scope of why the conferences are aligning, how they are, it's hard to see how it plays out. And at the end of the day, here's what I think about conference realignment today on July 11th, 2022. And that's that, the NCAA has done a terrible job in terms of how they've handled NIL, in terms of how they've handled the transfer rules, in terms of how they've handled those types of things that the NCAA is supposed to handle. Okay. Could some of these super conferences go ahead and just get together and say, screw the NCAA? Like, why does that even exist? We'll have our rules as a conference and we'll coordinate with the other 2 or 3 super conferences that are looking like they're going to get formed. Is that a possibility? Yes. And I think that could be a very nice byproduct that these conferences will say, okay, listen, okay, the NCAA isn't going to do anything about NIL and some of these boosters throwing a lot of money at kids. We're going to make this particular rule for kids in our conference. And, the other conference is going to be like, yes, we want to save college football. We want to be on par with these, with this other conference. We want to get invited to these bowl games, whoever becomes in charge of that. And so therefore we're going to abide by the same rules as this particular conference. So is it possible that one conference gets so big and does things in a certain way that it puts pressure on some of these other schools to, not abuse NIL rules? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. In terms of where Notre Dame fits, I had heard, and again, I say this with a grain of salt. I don't have any inside information. I don't have sources at Notre Dame. I'm not trying to insinuate that. However, I had heard at one point that Notre Dame was going to make a pretty quick decision about where it was going to go, or if it was going to go, and that we were going to hear one way or the other soon. It appears that was not true. It appears like that was a load of hokum because, and really it makes sense. Notre Dame has taken a really very reasoned approach with NIL. It's going to take a reasoned approach. They're going to say, they're going to wait and see how some of these dominoes fall, knowing that there's always going to be a place for Notre Dame at the table of any of the big college football mega conferences. Notre Dame could wait till every other team joined a conference and still have their pick of what conference they wanted to go in, despite what some people are saying in the comments right now. I think that, here's where I stand currently. I've been a guy that has always really loved Notre Dame being independent. Um, there's a lot, even some national media people this week have said things about Notre Dame and how the fact that they supposedly don't play anyone it is just a load of baloney. And when national media type guys are talking positively about Notre Dame, that is that's telling. Let's put it that way. So, I've loved the independence of Notre Dame over the years. And before I go on, I have to address this person in the comments because really he is just sort of distracting me. Eric, who is clearly an Oregon fan, says, "Why did ND flop on Dante?" Well, Eric, my friend, you must have missed the first 20 minutes of the show. So, didn't work out with Dante. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Notre Dame didn't want Dante Moore or whatever. I'm not going to do that. But, go back and watch the first 20 minutes of the show. But anyway, back to Notre Dame conference talk. So as much as I've liked Notre Dame's independence and, because it lets them go and play in California every year against either USC or Stanford, and then it lets them go to the East Coast, and they've played games in Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park, and they've played games at Soldier Field, and they've played games in Washington D.C. You get the point. Notre Dame's schedule allows them to do that. They consistently schedule USC, Stanford, other brand names. They've had obviously tons of Big Ten opponents over the years. They've had, Navy's a game that, even though on the football field it might not be the most exciting game for people outside of Notre Dame and Navy fans, it's an important game for a variety of reasons, and they constantly add guys or add teams like Ohio State. They add teams like Clemson. They have Cincinnati on there, who was obviously very good last year. They schedule brand name opponents, and on occasion, one or two of those brand names that they schedule aren't going to be very good, and Notre Dame's schedule is just going to look, but Notre Dame's not hiding from anybody. And so the independence has allowed them to not do that. It's allowed them to, schedule some really good schools, some really good teams, the ability to, travel from coast to coast and do all of that. And these conference realignment things isn't going to change that. So if Notre Dame were to stay independent, I guess the question then becomes, are these super conferences only going to ever play within these super conferences, or can Notre Dame just cherry pick the best out of the Big Ten and the best out of the SEC and schedule a couple of other teams and go from there? Possibly. However, okay, as much as I have loved Notre Dame independence, I've also thought, joining a conference, whether it's the ACC, whether it's the Big Ten, whatever, I've never thought that joining into a conference would be a terrible, terrible thing to do. And now that Notre Dame rivals such as, USC, potentially at some point Stanford, Michigan, and then other teams like Ohio State, other teams like Purdue that Notre Dame has a decent history with, Michigan State. Now that all of these teams are together in the Big Ten, why not join the Big Ten? People are going to scream to tradition. People are going to scream, Notre Dame's never done this. People are going to scream a lot of things. But in my opinion, okay, if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, does that change the fact that Notre Dame is one of the premier Catholic Midwestern universities? And not even just Midwestern universities or Catholic. Is that going to change the fact that Notre Dame is a premier university in the country? Absolutely not. Okay. I don't think that joining the Big Ten is selling out. I don't think the Big Ten is, that any of these things is Notre Dame selling its soul to the devil to be able to participate in something else. I don't think that's it at all. I think Notre Dame stands for what they stand for. It doesn't matter if they have, a Big Ten logo on their field or not. Kind of catching up on some of the comments here. Oh dear, there's a lot going on in the comments here. Premier Midwestern Catholic University, pretty tight criteria right there. Yeah, you're right. I caught myself after I said that. I myself went to the University of Dayton, so it's a pretty premier Midwestern Catholic University as well. So, I like this comment from Tim Prangley. What if it costs Notre Dame playing USC because now they will be going east at least 8 times for conference play? Maybe USC takes a break and stays on the West Coast for their out-of-conference games. I think that's a really good point. And what Tim's saying here is, obviously USC has joined the Big Ten. They've decided that, they're going to participate. That's going to be a lot of travel for a team like USC, for a team like UCLA, for a team like Stanford if they join. Could USC say, well, we're already playing all these games in Ohio and Indiana and all of that. We don't want to go out there for an out-of-conference game to play Notre Dame. I think that's a really good point. So, maybe Notre Dame joining the Big Ten is how they continue to have that rivalry with USC and Stanford, and UCLA and Notre Dame have met on the gridiron a few times and have at least a little bit of history there as well. So, I think that's a really good point as well. Roger Dodger says, let Notre Dame wait and see. It's none of anyone's business what they do. If they miss the boat, then so be it. I don't think, I agree with the first part of it. I don't think Notre Dame is going to miss the boat. I think that, again, like I said a little bit ago, I think Notre Dame ends up wherever they want to end up because, the stats, the measurables say, Notre Dame joined the ACC for a year and the ACC made a lot more money. I mean, and let's be honest, what drives these decisions? And it's money. It's money for sure. At the end of the day, if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten and they have a schedule that includes Michigan, USC, Stanford, Ohio State on occasion, and then you can get some out-of-conference games with Navy, and then you throw in there, the Purdue's and the other teams, in Purdue's tier in the Big Ten, the Iowas, Wisconsin's once in a while. If you put a schedule together where it includes USC and Stanford and those guys every year, and then you mix up the rest of the Big Ten, seems like a fun schedule to me. So that's kind of my opinion. Again, Notre Dame is, they're not going to miss the boat. They're gonna pick a conference and they're gonna play in it, or they're gonna remain independent. But I think, like I say, it makes sense that Notre Dame's taking kind of a slow approach. They're slow playing this to see how things play out, to see how things. Where do they fit? Are they going to be able to play these games that they've been accustomed to playing when they've had an independent schedule? Or is that going to be more difficult? And if it's more difficult, then they join a conference and they just go play football. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the situation. Again, kind of just catching up on some of the comments here. Seems like I like this question. How do you feel about the Big Ten telling Oregon no thank you? I don't know if that was directed to me or some of the Oregon fans or the Oregon fan in the comments. But at the end of the day, are we sure that Oregon isn't going to end up in the Big Ten permanently? I'm not. I mean, I think they took USC and UCLA, and that was a no-brainer. And now they're, trying to get, the right brands at the right times. Okay. Well, we're going to sort of wrap up here. I think that I actually ended up talking on here for quite a bit longer than I really anticipated. Again, you have been watching Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I am Ben Belden, and if you would like to continue this conversation and hear about some of the other things that I tweet about, follow me on Twitter at RealBBelden. It's right there on your screen. I'd love to hear from you. So if you follow me on there, I'm more than happy to follow back anybody who wants to talk college football, and we'll do so in a reasoned manner. So follow me there on Twitter. You'll also know when I'm doing one of these lives. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, Mark Rogers TV, MarkRogersTV.com will take you right to the YouTube channel. So you can do that. And again, if you are watching this on YouTube, whether you're watching it live right now or you're watching it on a tape delay later, underneath the YouTube video that you are watching, there's ways to contribute to Mark Rogers TV so that he's able to do things, bring on guests like me, allow me to come on. And, one of the things that I was able to do most of the time last year was do Notre Dame post-game stuff. And, that's pretty fun. And I'll be doing that, a whole awful lot again this year after Notre Dame games, especially the ones that I don't go to. And so, make sure that you do all those things and support, support us, those of us that, work over here, especially Mark, who does a great job covering everything college football. Lastly, I'll be on here pretty soon. It's been, since pretty much the end of the season that I've been able to talk Notre Dame football. Obviously with just over, here we go, 7 or 8 weeks until the college football season starts. Obviously I'll be on here a lot more, talking about Notre Dame when they get a commit. I would expect Notre Dame to land a couple of wide receiver commits. I had that on my to-do list here to talk about in this podcast. I didn't get there today, and talk about some other things about what we're going to see from Notre Dame as we get closer to the season. How's Notre Dame going to look? I saw somebody in the comments talking about how Notre Dame is going to look without Brian Kelly's influence, with the play calling. How is, when is Notre Dame going to hear from wide receiver prospects, guys that are going to commit to Notre Dame in the wide receiver class, hopefully soon, in Jaden Greathouse and Ronan Hannafin, 2 guys that Notre Dame has had, that is offered, and to get in that wide receiver room to add to some of the guys that they already have. So, those are all things we didn't talk about, things that we'll talk about in the very, very near future. Again, this is, my final sign off of the night. If you stuck with me here for 47 minutes at this point, I appreciate you. I appreciate the comments. And we will talk to you later. So subscribe, follow me on Twitter, support Mark Rogers TV. I'll talk to you again soon.